Hey, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to this YouTube video that's going to be used by the Appalachian Authors Guild and here with me personally on our YouTube pages. We have a very, very interesting discussion we sort of teased on our last meeting, and this is something we think a lot of writers are going to be incredibly interested in hearing this discussion. We're going to be talking about how artificial intelligence impacts our industry, the writing industry, good and bad. And we're really grateful to have quite a few authors here tonight. Just a quick round table before we get into this. Linda Dopkins is going to be doing a quick presentation on research and historical research for writing, and it actually segues nicely right into how AI is helping writers right now. But first, let's go around. Let's start at the top of the screen here. Let's Jason introduce to you, and then we'll go down to Nancy, and then Linda, and then Tammy and Carrie.
I'm Jason Houghton. I've been part of the guild now for 2.5, 3 years. These Zoom meetings, I think, are a great addition to our in-person meetings, and they stand alone. And I think tonight we're going to cover a very, very needed and prominent topic in developing our craft. Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Wade. I'm a member of the Lost State Writers Guild, and I write cozy mysteries and some historical type of novels. So tonight's topic totally interests me for both Linda's research and AI. And I'm hoping to maybe use AI to help me do an adult coloring book, kind of to piggyback on some of my novels and pick up the theme on one of my novels and incorporate it into the type of scenes that you'd see in a coloring book. So I understand AI does a great job with that, so I'm hoping to do more.
Do you have a website, Nancy?
So far I've been toying with a few, and the one I've looked at is called Blue Willow AI, and you basically describe the kind of picture you want. Okay. They use as an example a little boy with his dog on the moon, and then it creates pictures of like cartoon settings. And for a coloring book, sure, you want everything in a black and white line type of drawing, because then when you load it into your book, of course, the reader or the user is going to color it literally.
Do you have a website where people can find your work?
Yes, it is simply nancymwade.com.
All right. Yeah, everybody feel free and plug your websites too. Go ahead, Linda.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I do have a website, and it's joallisonauthor.com, because Joe Allison is my pen name. And let's see, a lot of it has to do with a series that I wrote some time ago that is set in St. Louis, and a nonfiction book that sort of came out of that. I had a publisher contact me probably because of that, and because of one of the things I'll talk about here in the moment is little history. And I have a website out there that talks about the little history, the details of living in St. Louis in 1910. And the editors at Globe Pequot Press found that, and therefore asked me to write a nonfiction book, which is Storied and Scandalous St. Louis, a history of breweries, baseball, prejudice, and protests. So that book is out there and discussed on my website as well.
Cool. Go ahead, Tammy.
I'm Tammy Robinson Smith. I'm a longtime member of Appalachian Authors Guild and Lost State Writers Guild. I write Appalachian fiction centered on the lives of women living in the region, both past and present. And I'm really excited to learn more about AI tonight. I feel like I'm just starting my education on that. Oh, and I do have a website. It's tammyrobinsonsmith.com, and I have a Facebook page, Tammy Robinson Smith Author, which is where you'll probably find me more often than anywhere else.
All right, thanks. All right, Carrie, we'll tee it up to you.
Carrie Kilgore. I belong to Appalachian Authors Guild and Lost State Writers Guild. I write pretty much every genre, fantasy, science fiction, romance, crime, all over the place, different historical periods, short stories, novels. Pretty much I figure out what the genre is going to be after I'm finished writing. And my website is carriekilgore.com. And I've heard a good bit about AI with other indie writers. I am definitely on the skeptical side here, just get that out. But it's always good to learn more about research, especially, I mean, even if I'm writing science fiction, there are things I need to look up, or even if I'm writing fantasy, there needs to be a framework. So it's a fascinating topic. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and speaking of frameworks, here's the queen of building frameworks and delivering just immense amounts of research and help to other writers. So, Linda, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you. And thanks again for all you've done for the guild and for us with the previous. Yeah,
You
Jason.
didn't do your intro. We all.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm JC. I'm the vice president of the guild, and been a member for a few years. I write under a pen name Cyrus Alderwood. So you notice this crazy banner behind me, this logo, the Gonzo Chronicles. It's part of a series that I've written. So I've got about 10 books on Amazon, like a lot of other folks. I've been writing for a number of years, and I used to have a website, but didn't get a lot of hits. So I just go to Substack now. So cyrusalderwood.substack.com. If anybody's interested in reading sample writing prompts, random thoughts, essays, whatever, I write and put things on there for the last year. And also, like Tammy, I'm on Facebook, not very often, but some. Hey, that's it. I'm not that cool. so I'll turn it over. Hey, thanks.
Okay, well, I will talk a little bit about research, and basically this is sort of a very short recap of what I spent 3 hours doing at Writers and Readers Day in a workshop. And some of you have heard me say some of this, but oh, you know, never hurts to say things again, right? I'm really good at saying things again. So when I started that, I used the phrase world building. And I have a friend who writes both science fiction and fantasy, and she really chumped my case about it. She said, "Oh, that's genre specific. You know, I mean, world building is something you do in those particular genres." And I said, "Well, you know, I think world building is not only something you do in those genres, but certainly in historical fiction, you are building a world too. And for that matter, I think you're building a world in contemporary fiction. You know, because certainly if you have a character who lives in the Upper East Side, New York City, and summers on Cape Cod, that's very different from somebody who lives in, LA and hangs out with a gang or something. I mean, place is still important, even if time is not important. And it still involves research, and it involves building a world. And the whole point of that is, this is the way I think of it. I think of some situation that pushes my character's buttons. That's not a very elegant way to say it, but I need something that will build conflict, and the world around a person builds conflict. And so I think it applies to any genre of fiction. To be honest, I think, and Carrie could tell me more for sure here, but I think even science fiction and fantasy require research. I mean, I think it seems to me, and I've never written either, but I've read both, that you tend to continue the conventions, okay, that other people have set up. And that is a kind of research. My same friend that said I couldn't use that phrase world building for other things, at the time I was beta reading one of her fantasy books, and she felt like she had to give me a quick course on the physiognomy of goblins because apparently I didn't really know enough about goblins, and that's a kind of research. But now I know a lot more about goblins. But I think that even if you're making up the history, you have to ask yourself the same questions that if you're, as you do when you're looking at, quote, real history, and of course the line between those sort of blurs. Okay, so I think the biggest problem of doing research is that you can really go down the rabbit hole and find that you spend so much time doing research that it takes away from the time that you need to be writing. Okay. And as I say, some of you have heard me say this before, but I always like to divide up my research into what I call big history and little history. And I always write it big history, all caps, and little history, little tiny stuff. Okay. Because that really is the distinction. And I think that distinction is important, but I've come to think it's really important in terms of telling you how much research to do. Okay. And big history, that's the stuff you learned back in high school. I mean, it's the wars and the big movements, like, in the time period I write in, progressive ideas, prohibition, suffrage, all that sort of thing. It's those big movements. Okay. And I think that is where you need to put in your research time. But what you really need to do is not just stay on the surface. Okay. Right now I'm writing a World War I era. I don't know what it's going to be, several books. And, if I just said World War I, the usual tropes are things like the trenches and the trenches and the trenches. I mean, that's it. That's the war that people talk about. But what you need to do with big history is dig. You need to find what I call the holes in history. You need to find the little people level conflicts that the larger conflict has caused. And in one of the books that I have finished and is now out there sort of circulating, I got to looking around and I got interested in the fact that early in immediately, first thing in World War I, Germany invaded neutral Belgium, and Belgium became an occupied territory for the rest of the war. And that's different. I mean, that's different than what we usually think of when we think World War I. And one of the things that happened in occupied Belgium is that they quickly ran out of food. Belgium was the most industrialized country in the world at the time, produced almost none of their own food. Okay. And so when a blockade went up, they were starving. There was this guy in London, an American engineer named Herbert Hoover, who said, I can't let that happen. And so he organized a food program, and had to negotiate with both the British and the Germans to let the food into Belgium. And then he needed people on the ground in order to make the food distribution happen. And so he went to Oxford and found Americans who were Rhodes Scholars. Okay? The point here is, you just keep digging into this and you find books that are popular histories in which somebody has gotten on this wild tear about some little thing. Okay? And I actually found a book about some of these Rhodes Scholars from all over the US, okay, who happened to be in Oxford and who were willing to stop their education and go behind the German lines to help get food out. The book was actually written by the, I think, grandson of one of those people, but you find the book like that and suddenly, you've narrowed your research. Okay? And in that case, I was able to use that because these Americans had to be neutral. And so when one of the Americans falls in love with a woman who is a British spy, the romance has to fall apart because she can't tell him who she is, because she would destroy his neutrality. And if that word got out to the Germans, they could just close down the whole food operation and an entire country would, starve to death. So, but that's what I mean by you dig until you find the conflict that your characters can use. So when it comes to big history, it's worth it to keep digging and to get into those little nooks and crannies of history, not the tropes that everyone hears about, but to keep digging. Okay? Little history, on the other hand, that's the everyday stuff, where people lived, what they wore, what they ate, important stuff like what they do for birth control. I mean, all the nitty gritty of how people got around. And that's where you can go down the rabbit hole, okay? Because you could just keep reading that stuff forever. And there's two problems with that. One is the time it takes, but the other problem is if you know a whole lot about a time period that way, you're likely to want to use it. And that's actually a mistake, I think. You need to know, obviously, you need to know the basic things like how quickly can people communicate and how do they travel. Those are really the biggies when you get down to many of our stories. Okay. But I think the thing to do at that point, okay, is to start writing. Okay. Stop researching, start writing. And then when you get to the point where you're writing something about some, early automobile and you need to know if it's right-hand drive or left-hand drive, then you go look for that. And I don't know about you, but I mean, whatever we say about AI, I am certainly blessed to live in the age of internet research. I can pull up pictures of any car anybody used, and I write in the, in the 19 teens basically, and I can read all about it. I know which side the steering wheel was on. Did it have to be cranked? All that sort of thing. I can find that, but I don't want to find that ahead of time. Okay. And then when I do find it, I think the little history is where you pull people in. When people say, wow, it was just like I took a trip back in history. And it's not because you throw a lot at them. It's because you throw at them just what your characters would live. If that makes sense. In other words, you don't have someone go up, you don't have a character say, oh, this car's right-hand drive, or right side drive. No, you have your character look at her only passenger over to her left, and that's just enough to tell your reader that, wow, this is not the world I live in. This is a world somebody else lives in. But you usually don't make a big deal of these little history things. I once put down a Ken Follett book, and I mean, he's, the master of writing historical fiction. And he was describing, I think it was an English manor or something, and all the details about it. And readers can tell. It was like between the lines, it said, look how much I know about English manor houses, I mean, because there were details that weren't telling me about the characters. They weren't even telling me about the story. I swear they were there because he'd researched them, and dadgum, he was going to put them in the book.
I'm glad you mentioned that writers pick that, or readers will pick that up, because I'm reading a book called Night Over Water by that very same author, and and it is so long. And I know there's little pieces of information you need to know because it takes place World War II Britain. But there's so much there that's kind of not necessary. You can probably knock off a few pages and save your reader yeah. So not, I don't say boredom, but it's not really advancing the story.
Right.
Did you find that when you started on your books and started doing all this research that was an issue for you in the beginning?
I don't know that it was, but one of the things that people who do this kind of research, and I think it's true in science fiction and fantasy too, if you create a world, you tend, I assume, to write more books in that in that space. And I know I tend to write books in the same historical period because I think at the first I did a lot of research, but I think I was lucky in that I knew I was going to write a series, so I didn't feel like I had to use every bit of it in that first book. I thought, oh, well, that's a neat thing to know, but I don't have to use it this time. I'll use that some other day, in some other book.
Yeah.
And so that really helped. But I really think you have to consciously say to yourself when you're doing research, cool it, put this, or if you've got more stuff than you can use, put it in a little box in your head and, a little over here to the side and say, I'll come back and use that someday.
Yeah.
Because, and be careful how you use it then,
Yeah. Fictional worlds, I guess that is probably fascinating. Carrie probably knows a lot more about that than I will, but I certainly know more about Castle Rock than I know about my own hometown. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, we create places that are very real to us, and they're real because we have done research and we know all these details, of what the cars were like and what the transportation was like. And I always tell a story about I managed to walk into St. Louis where my series is set, and I walked into the research library for the Missouri Historical Society, and they had this beautiful 1915 map of parks. It was a park and recreations map on the wall. And I said, oh, can I get a copy of that? And bless their hearts, they found the original, and they didn't have anything that could scan the whole thing. So they do little pieces of it, I mean, little 8 by 10 pieces of it. And then they helped me, and it took like 3 of us, and we put it together, we taped it, so we had a whole big map of St. Louis. And then I went to the city directory and I got the subway lines, so I knew where the different subway things, and I marked those on the map. And since it's a murder mystery thing, the police are big, I marked each of the police districts and all that. So I have this wonderful map, but then I would use it for things. I mean, I studied it so much that when I was physically in, St. Louis in, I don't know, 2005 or whatever, if I wanted to get across town, that map was in my head, because I knew it, and I would say, darn, they put that interstate right where my, right where my streetcar needs to go, and that sort of thing. So it is, in that sense, maybe I had too much stuff. And then I guess the rest of that story is, one day I was found a house that my protagonist was going to live in, and I needed to know which subway she would ride to get down to the police station. And so, but there are different ways to go, right? So I'm physically in St. Louis in a car with my husband, and we're driving in July, and it's hot and it's humid in St. Louis, and there is road construction everywhere. And I have now gone back to the house twice and followed streetcar routes, so I could say, oh, like the old hospital was still there, so okay, I can use that. She can, and I'm very subtle, right? She's going to pass the hospital and all this sort of thing. And on about the third trip, my husband just loses it and screams at me, Linda, they call it fiction for a reason. And he's absolutely right. They do call it fiction for a reason. And you really can go overboard on these things, but it becomes an obsession sometimes. But I think you have to be careful of the little history, so at any rate, that's what I have to say about research. And I did develop for that workshop a couple of lists of good places to start when you're looking at big history and how to delve into it. I really like the old thing of being able to go to a Research One library. A Research One is the academic designation for the really big universities that have one copy of everything nonfiction, okay, in their libraries. And the two that are close here are obviously the University of Tennessee and Virginia Tech. And I was close to Virginia Tech at the time I was writing these things. So, I did what I would call shake the shelves. You find one book that might be important, and then you realize you really don't care about that. What you care about is its call number. And you go up to that shelf, and you found it. And you may look at that book, you may not, but you start taking out the books that are on the same shelf and looking through them and looking for that hole in history, that way to go deeper into the history. So that's fun if you can actually get to a library. But anyway, I think there's a 1-page thing on big history and a 2-page thing on all the places to find little history, where to find the best maps, where to find, there's a catalog, Dover catalogs are just wonderful. They have everything about clothing and all of the detail stuff, okay? And all that's written down. So if anyone ever is looking for something and can't find it, ask me and I'll send you one of those sheets that I handed out there. Okay. So having said all that, I have occasionally tried to, just here lately, go a little bit deeper in historical research by using AI. I was trying to get my husband to write something he's interested in. My husband's interested in the West and Western history. He's from Kansas, and there's some guy who was with Custer, but got diverted somehow and didn't die at Little Bighorn. And my husband has often said, I'd like to do research about this guy. So we go on to AI, and I asked AI about him, and I thought, this is wonderful. It's going to pop up all these sources. And it totally missed all the important things about this guy. I mean, and it said, yes, we know that name. He was with the 7th Cavalry and he was born in Italy, and, but it missed the important things, like he was in prison for a while because he tried to help assassinate Louis Napoleon, and, little things like that, and then escaped. Yeah. I mean, it totally missed all that. So I kept prompting the AI to say, but what about this? What about this? And it just kept giving me the same stuff it had given me the first time, which made me a little wary of using AI for research. And I guess in that case, you know, I could do a search for this guy and come up with perfectly good stuff, you know, on a Google search. You know, the only difference is I just have to sit there and go through each one of them. It doesn't pop up within a split second, and it's not in a beautiful narrative form, but in that case, I can find things. I think our discussion of AI might want to center on the things that AI does a bit better, which is, at least for writers, what I found is being more creative in terms of plot ideas and that sort of thing. So there's your segue into AI.
Well,
Doug,
I want to just real quick kick this down to Carrie, because you at the very beginning of this mentioned that you were a skeptic, and I come into this conversation with some trepidation about AI as well, and maybe it's from lack of understanding, or I noticed in the sidebar we've had a couple of really good links that were shared with the group here. I don't know if this will show up in the recording. I hope so. If not, if you guys could email me those links and post them directly, and I'll put them in the comments on the YouTube page for people to look at. But tell us a little bit about what makes you kind of skeptical on this, Carrie. And I know we're in the middle of a writer's strike in Hollywood and an actor's strike, and there's a whole lot going on there. But I'll just kick that over to you and get your thoughts there.
Sure, that's a big that's the WGA strike is definitely highlighted, and the SAG-AFTRA strike as well. Some of the issues with AI, that a lot of people's jobs stand to be taken, and I don't mean, you know, like once the AI research gets better, like you said, Linda, it's suspect. Once it gets better, some of those things can be used for good, and also in medical field, yes, absolutely. Or my goodness, something's up with my car. Little things like that can definitely be used for the good. But once you start taking human creativity out of it, then we're going to hit a problem. And one of those big problems is copyright. That's the article, more information I shared as a recent court case that we need to be aware of, because using these tools can open us up to copyright issues, number one. And number two, the biggest concern with the way it's being used right now is a lot of theft of intellectual property, because I haven't given permission for my books to be scraped. Now, I am not well known by any means, but I haven't given permission for my books to train AI. And graphic artists have not given permission for their artwork to train AI. But that's a huge thing that's happening. And so these people's intellectual property is being stolen, and they're being pushed out. And one of the biggest issues with the actor strike is day worker actors that aren't, you know, they aren't the top marquee, but they're vitally important. What they're saying is, oh yeah, you come in, we'll scan your whole body, we'll pay you for that day, and then we'll use you from then on, and you won't get any more pay. Then, wait a minute, hang on. So there's very real theft and legal protection issues with it. And the idea of taking the human creativity out of it just really catches at me, because that's our vital gift. That's our vital thing that everybody in the world needs. We need storytellers, we need artists, we need musicians to have that human spark. And to take that out of it makes me very uncomfortable.
Go ahead, Jason.
So my question would be, in one of the articles I read earlier, leading up to this meeting, because I was kind of psyched about it. One guy, the question I have, based on reading the different opinions, is you write a sentence, you put it through AI, is it still your sentence, or do you feel that if it corrects 50% of your sentence for grammar, is it no longer your sentence? Is it no longer protected by you?
You mean just like a grammar checker, like Grammarly?
Well, grammar or wording, verbiage. Let's face it, verbiage is a lot of our own fingerprints on a story. And I mean, I know there's verbs I like using almost every story. And there's words I throw in. And they may be nickel and dime words, but they're still mine. You know, I know JC has some words that I've caught him used over and over again. And our sentence structure is our fingerprint. If AI changes that, but it's still the same sentence and can move the story forward the same way, do you all feel it is still our work? would it, you feel it was still yours?
Well, I don't know that you have to, I mean, when you put something through AI, as I understand it, for essentially a copy edit, which is what you're talking about, and it suggests changes. But that's the same thing that a human copy editor does. They suggest changes and you don't have to take them. You can say, in
True.
fact, I mean, I work with a critique group, and I was yesterday I was looking at something, and one of the guy uses the tracking thing where it goes through and marks things out. I like to
Yeah.
just put comments in so people can think about it. But he had something that had taken one of my words out, and I said, no, that's not what I meant. I understand it looks like an unnecessary word, but it refers to something up above. And so I just don't accept that change. So if all you're using AI for is to check things like that, I mean, you don't have to accept their changes. It's not going to get published like that. And that's all that a human copy editor does too. So I think that's a matter, not so much of what AI does as how we use it. I think we can control that sort of thing, but I think my question there is, why would I bother if AI is going to change, a bunch of,
Right.
I don't try. We had this discussion at Law State the other day that I was doing a grammar thing, and I'd put some sentences in Grammarly to see if it, what it said about the grammar. And I was really just wanting to put in two different ones and check for comma usage, but it told me that my sentence in it was just a simple sentence like "we won." There is a, and it said that's not a sentence. And so I immediately sort of going, oh, well, I'm not too cool on your, on your grammar either, even though we know Grammarly hires good grammarians, and I like to use their blog sites. I mean, and luckily those are free, so I can go to those and check things, but that's not what they're using to do those kind of checks. So I think, but back to the point there, I think that whatever you're using AI for in that regard, my same friend who was the one who objected to me using world building, sent something off to a copy editor and then sent something off to a proofreader. And they gave her very different comments, and she'd gone through and changed a bunch of things that the copy editor suggested. And then the proofreader said, no, that's wrong. And I'm going, wow, she probably would have been better off just using AI at that point and taking what she, felt was appropriate. But anyway, that's one answer to that.
What I'll say there, to build off what you said, Linda, protect your voice. Your voice is that vital thing that all six of us start with a prompt and write a story. And it's our voice that is exciting. It's our voice that's interesting. It's our voice that is copyrighted. The words themselves, I mean, it's the way I express it, the way I express my dog just leaning into frame so she could yawn just a minute ago. It's not the fact that a great Black Great Dane leaned into frame. I can't copyright that, but the fact that the way I describe it is unique. So my voice, my words, the way I put my words together. We're in Appalachia. Come on, we've all got a great, we have a unique way of speaking, whether we speak that way or not. Most of us knew people who did. So protect your voice, either from AI or from a human copywriter. That's vital.
Yeah, I mean, I speak 3 languages: hillbilly, redneck, and English. And it all comes through when I write in like some local dialect and tones. But Nancy and Tammy, I want to toss this to you. From what you've heard so far, would you be comfortable having any kind of an AI program editing or making comments or suggestions with your writing?
Well, I can tell you that I have used Grammarly, and I also have another program that I have loaded on my PC, and it's called Pro Writing Aid. And it is truly an AI program. And I guess what I would say that I use it for is being what I still think of myself as a new writer. I've got 10 novels and I still feel like I'm a new writer. But I'll take a chapter and I'll download it into this Pro Writing Aid, and it runs an analysis, and then it will kick out a report to me, and it will highlight different sentences, and maybe it's it'll find some punctuation errors. Okay, fine. You know, I need a second pair of eyes, so that's helpful. Then it'll look at grammar, and sometimes it'll say, oh, you know, you're using passive verbs. You need to use a more active tense here. And it'll suggest, it won't substitute, but it will suggest, instead of, oh, something like taken, it'll give me 3 or 4 other verbs that mean something similar. I've used it, and sometimes I've made the corrections that it has suggested, but there have been other times when, if I had made those same corrections, just like Carrie says, it would have changed my whole voice and what I wanted that particular scene to say. And so it might have been more grammatically correct the way pro writing did it, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so you really have to be careful. I think the AI programs that make those kind of analysis, looking at your writing, you know, the tone, the grammar, the punctuation, all of that, I guess you still have to be confident enough to look at it and say, this is a good change, this is a bad one, and be able to make your own decisions, what you want to use and what you're going to ignore, because it doesn't really understand what's in your mind as what your mood was, what scene you wanted to set, what you were trying to convey, the emotion in this particular paragraph or chapter or even dialogue. So you have to use it with a grain of salt.
That's good feedback that you've had experience with that and kind of know how to, I guess, navigate it with your own personality, you know, your own vision. How about you, Tammy? Is this something that, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, I'm sort of new to the whole thing, and I always treat new technology. I just always remember as soon as VCRs came out, my dad went out and bought one and paid $600 or $800 for one, you know. And I mean, it was really cool to be one of the first people to have one, but you know, then there was a lot of changes along the way, and not that we use VCRs anymore, but that's just kind of the example that sticks with me, that maybe buying the first of anything is not always the best bet. But I think, I don't know, as far as proofing or editing with AI, I'm not sure that would be something I would be really interested in. I guess if it gets to the point that I feel like the research is, you know, dependable, or that we know that what we're, you know, research wise getting, that it's valid, I guess is maybe the word I'm looking for, I would maybe depend on it for that some. But I don't know, I have enough trouble with, I'm kind of like you were talking about the lady that had the proofreader and the editor, and got too, it's hard enough with humans, and I don't know if I'd want to introduce anyone else into that process, because it makes me nuts as it is.
Yeah, I'd like to,
Or anyone else, or anything rather.
yeah, just a thought on this. And I don't know, Linda, you're probably a lot more technologically savvy, you and Carrie, than I am. I have a love-hate relationship with technology. I'm serious. It took me a while to go to a smartphone. And you know, Jason, the first thing that I think of when we're talking about an AI like Nancy was describing is, you know, it's great to get that feedback, but it almost, I hate to sound, I'm dating myself here, but it feels like I would be listening to Hal from 2001, you know. And my first thought is, okay, it's great it could go point out, hey, go use different style, or here's some suggestions and all that. But as a writer trying to learn, I've been doing this since 1999, Nancy. So, and I still feel like a new writer. I'm learning all the time from, you know, when we get Tammy or Linda or Carrie or anybody that stands in front of our group and, you know, educates us on some aspect of our craft. I sort of feel like, as a writer, I know this is really weird. Well, I don't know. Maybe a lot of writers feel this way. I would feel sort of cheated in going back and reviewing my own work and diving back in and seeing, does this make sense? of the message I'm trying to convey between me and my readers or my potential audience. It maybe it sounds like the easy way to go listen to AI and give that suggestion. I may come to that conclusion, but it's sort of robbed me of the real learning process and not just being told what to do. Does that make sense? And I think that there's somewhere in that is where we grow as writers. And do you think that AI might actually hinder that in the future? Like, are we going to get the next Hemingway or Fitzgerald, Steinbeck, Stephen King, Carrie Kilgore? We don't know. I mean, are we, or would something like this hinder the development of some of the more creative minds that we have out there?
Well, I throwing a question out to the group. I know we have some former educators in the writing guilds. AI, a lot more students are using AI to write their papers and do their research. Are we losing an element in the teaching process with the AI stepping in and doing those things for us? I'm just throwing the question out there for some feedback, and it kind of boils over into our craft. If they're not learning it in school, all they're learning how to do is activate the AI and throwing in some keywords. Are they losing the ability to research? Are they losing the ability to critical think?
I was having this kind of same discussion with my son, who's 28. I said the other day he was 27 and he corrected me. One kid, I can't keep up with how old he is. But anyway, he's 28 and he's a working professional. And we were having a discussion about AI, and especially with him about AI in the workplace. And he said that he was seeing more people, or seeing an application where people were using it to create business, right? Whether, like, he works in the financial field, so it's like either just inter office communication or just general communications or things like that. And I just wonder, like I said, he's 28 and he's just being introduced to it. But when you think that, I have grandkids that are in second and fourth grade, and they're probably, I don't know, but I mean, I'm sure at a certain point in their academic career, they're going to be introduced to it. And it's going to be the same thing. It's kind of like with the computer or the iPhone or anything else. You're going to eventually get a generation they don't know any other way, maybe, than just that this has been a part of their lives. It's less like now the whole thing, if you want somebody to help you with your iPhone, find an elementary school student, and maybe that it'll be that way with AI. So I stand on the fence because I don't want to be a fuddy-duddy who says, oh, that new fangled stuff, I'll never, I'm not gonna get on board with that. But I still have, like some of the rest of you had said, I still have a little bit of trepidation of taking that human factor out of things as well.
I don't want to be left behind, like you said.
Right.
I want to make sure that the technology is there to further the craft that we have spent so much time trying to create and perfect in our own way and vision, as it is to be a hindrance. And and I wanted to ask, I don't roundabout question, but two things I want to point out before I just ask this question. The things that we've talked about so far, I was jotting some notes down, and the possible jobs eliminated by AI, copy editors, is that coming down the road? Are we going to have, once this gets better, are we going to have a need for a copy editor or an editor at a magazine or a newspaper or a website or anything? And when we were talking about the Hollywood movies, and you can go in and get so much good history from AI, are we eliminating the need for historians that can go in and describe certain areas that they're an expert in? I could do an AI search on medieval weapons, dark age weapons, like I'm this book I'm writing now, or I could just pick up. I don't know if anybody can see this book, but it's a book on it's called Warrior by Osprey Publishing. It's an Anglo-Saxon Thegan from like the 500 AD to 1,000. And yeah, I've got so many good pictures and description and stuff in here. Am I going to get that from AI, or am I going to get that from something I can hold in my hand that a real researcher had done, and maybe it was an expert on over 40 years of their life? All that can be wiped out in a minute by AI, possibly.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the opinions that everyone has said, and your questions. In my thought is, as individuals, as writers, as researchers, as editors, AI can only be used as a tool, not a replacement.
I agree with that.
If you can use it as a tool, as a time saver, ultimately it's going to be up to the individual, if it's an editor or if it's a researcher, to look at the information provided by AI, to analyze it and determine, is it valid? Is it misinformation? Like Linda has found, she's received false information through AI. If you don't have that base knowledge as the writer or the researcher or the editor, you need to make that determination. What you're getting from AI, is it useful or not? And we only should use it as a tool. I said, I use this pro writing aid more as a second pair of eyes to check my grammar and check my punctuation, because I'm not, 100% confident that I'm writing flawlessly, and I know who I'm not. And especially when I give my work over to Linda or Tammy to read and they bring it back to me with red ink. So I only use it as a tool. And there's a lot of times when, as I said, it totally doesn't understand what my intent was on that particular page. And so you can't let AI simply replace the human factor.
And it could be the biggest source of misinformation in the next 50 years, because Wikipedia, which everybody leans on. I don't know about you, Linda, but when I went to Wikipedia, and I know Carrie talked about scraping of information, I'm sure AI scrapes Wikipedia like nobody's business. And in some of the research I've done, I've found so many mistakes on Wikipedia that talk about certain topics I'm looking for, because I'll find refuted evidence in like the Welsh triads or the Mabinogion, things like that I'm researching. I'm like, well, these middle-aged monks wrote about this a long time ago. Did AI ever bother to scrape this information? And because Wikipedia is saying something totally different based off of whoever added that in there that was factually incorrect, or putting a best guess effort at best. I guess with that being said, how nervous are we that we're going to see in the next 10 years a fiction book that's hits the New York Times bestseller that was written by AI, and who gets credit for it?
It has to improve a lot before we can get there, because it's basically a big giant copy paste engine at this point. But I'm not saying it can't, because it has improved immensely in the last 2 years.
Isn't that the argument that a lot of the Hollywood writers are making right now? You're muted, Linda.
Linda, you're mute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's a learning machine, though. I mean, that's the whole idea, is that it will get better and that it will scrape more widely, And if that book you're talking about, JC, is in available in online, in an ebook version, then that could be scraped too. I mean, I'm not as worried about people in our generation doing. I really am worried about the scholarly thing. I mean, I remember when it was a big deal that we had software that you could scan a student's paper in. I used to teach college, that you could scan a student's paper in, and it would tell you if it was plagiarized.
They
Because
still use that, Linda.
Pardon?
They still use that.
Yeah, but
Almost
I don't know
all
how effective it's going to be for how long.
Yeah. Because
AI
all my papers that I submitted over the last couple of years to ETSU were all loaded into a program that scanned it for plagiarism, and you were given a range, a very narrow percentage that you were allowed some duplication.
Right. But my
without
point is, if you have students using AI and then to create a paper and then the technology is it's easier to put it into something, into a scanner thing that uses then AI, it's going to become redundant and it's going to become much harder to do that sort of thing. In my college teaching, we were critically worried about critical thinking, that students
Yeah.
are doing that. I mean, we spent hours saying, okay, where are you getting that information? Even if you start with Wikipedia, which they would do inevitably, look at the footnotes on Wikipedia. Unless someone maliciously goes in and changes the footnotes, you may be able to use Wikipedia to track down research. I mean, we spent hours back then, and I am. This is some sort of cowardice on my part, but I am glad I don't have to deal with that these days. That I don't have to deal with a paper that might be created by AI, or even fundamentally an AI paper that a student has taken and elaborated on, or tried to make it sound like their own language or something. I mean, you can do anything with that once you download it, and that might even be much harder to track. I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure that our software that scans for plagiarism is going to be effective in the age of AI. And I think that's what worries me. To your question, JC, will there be books out there that are totally AI? And I don't think along with Carrie, I think it'll be a while before a book would hang together, right, if it were done by AI. But certainly already, I mean, I don't know, this didn't get caught on the recording, but I have tried asking it for thoughts on creating a new novel, and is that even that thought process that starts, your creative work, is that wrong? And there are questions of where we'll draw the line, on how many ideas you can pick up from AI, even if AI doesn't write the thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, to play devil's advocate on the same topic. I mean, if you ask AI to generate an idea for you, how is that any different than me pulling from the Storymatic stack of cards and getting a writing prompt idea and then writing that tomorrow?
Or brainstorming with other, I mean, if we're sitting around the table brainstorming, it's like if you take an idea and run with it, but somebody else suggested it, I mean, you can really get deep in the weeds with that.
Yeah.
But one thing I was going to say though about the research, I remember this when I was in grad school many moons ago. One of my professors very adamantly declaring to us that 2% of what you find on the internet is accurate, because then the big thing was, oh, don't you use the internet? That's not the same as going to the library and hitting the old microfiche, finding those journal articles. So, I mean, at the rate it's going, I think before too long we may feel by AI like we do Wikipedia. It's a place to start.
And maybe it's
a big danger for this is all of us know how to have an idea and write a story, or we're doing the research, and there's that. What I think could be lost with AI research is, as the human reading through it, there's this explosion of, oh, that leads me to this part of the story, and that leads me to that part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The way I do research is, when I'm writing, whatever era it is, when I get to the thing I'm curious about, I stop, look it up, and then keep writing, because that way I don't lose the flow. I think if I leave a blank spot, there may have been a whole different branch that story was going to take that I'm cutting short by not finding my thing and moving on. And also, kids who start writing this way, how will they develop their voice? How will they develop their own individual way of looking at and expressing themselves, which will be the huge individual, the opinions, the attitudes might get watered, and everybody's writing might sound the same, which just is horrifying to me.
Exactly. That was my point
It's
from earlier. I
horrifying,
think
yes.
that was the thing that bothered me so much. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with using new tools if you know how to use the old tools. And that's kind of the way I look at it. If we don't continue to teach students how to go to a library and do research, how to look up things, how to find articles, how to, do this, that, or the other. And which I don't know. I mean, it's been a long time since I was in school, so I don't even know how much of that. I mean, Linda can probably speak to that with more recent knowledge of how much of that kind of stuff is even still taught now. But if you don't know those basics, then I do think it's a problem if you're just depending on technology to do these things and you don't have a basic knowledge. And I mean, even coming from a reporting background, it's like, check your sources, people. Don't take something at face value, question it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I
So
think,
Uh,
I was gonna say, I think the danger is if today's young people become so dependent on AI, and because they don't know how to do it manually, so to speak, going to the library, even using the internet, but searching and following up on other links to search for something. It's like these kids today that don't know how to write a complete sentence because they're used to so many characters on Twitter. That drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Before you get started, JC, I'm gonna, we're already a little bit over. We can go to 9:15 if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, let's give us another
If
10
not-
minutes. Yeah.
I want to put this out before people start. The 12th of October, is that good with their thumbs up if that's good with you guys for the next one?
Is that the second Thursday?
Second Thursday.
I'm good.
And I believe that's when Miss Carrie is going to be teaching us a thing or two.
I am.
But continuing on with this discussion, I think people have brought up, we're afraid that people will become too reliant on the tool, but ultimately I have to go back to the thing. It's just a tool, and it's how we use that tool. And I'll let you guys all chime in after that.
Let me do just a little pushback against some of this, because I think I probably agree with everybody, but somebody who is a defender of AI might say, skills change, and maybe the skill, as I've played around with it a little bit, the skill is in the prompt that you write, because every prompt that's worded even a little bit differently gets you a different result. I mean, if you're saying everybody's work will sound the same, it will only sound the same if they put exactly the same prompt out there. So, I mean, you can imagine a world in which, maybe not for, novels, but certainly for in a lot of other kinds of communication, if you write a slightly different prompt, you get a very different tone to the thing. So, I mean, it is possible that there is a generation. I mean, after all, the thing I did about, okay, they're scraping, but I'm scraping too. When I write something, I am going back to every Mark Twain novel I ever read, and all that stuff is in there subconsciously. And so I'm also scraping too, but it's still filtered through my experience. And I think with AI, what it's filtered through is that prompt, okay, before it scrapes. So it is possible that at least for some uses, it won't give us uniformity, because people will get better and better at writing the prompts. And you could even try it, I mean, put in a prompt for some story idea and then just change it slightly to say, and I want the theme to be sort of this, and you get something entirely different because it's scraped differently. So I just wanted to say that, that it could be, that we used to say that using the internet was, stupid because only, 98% of it was wrong, but now we say, oh, it's in how you use it. It could be that someday we will also look at AI and say, it's how you use it. And we actually are ahead of artificial intelligence. We are smarter about how we use it. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw out a sort of different,
And that's
some
maybe
people may
just
have out there.
part of just being human, our humanity. I mean, because a lot of what we write is about how we feel, and how we react based on those things, and whether it's rational or irrational. AI technology is always looking for the rational, but the story sometimes is in the irrational. No, in some of the things that we write. You mentioned the prompts, which is really interesting. I've been doing this writing prompt challenge for 13 weeks now. And I've mentioned this. I wrote a Substack about it just earlier today. And it is, Linda, a lot like you just said with those prompts. It's what we do with them. And I pull 3 cards out every week on a Monday, and it's 2 plot cards, or so to speak, and then 1 character card. And then the people who are going to do that prompt, they all get the same cards. And it is amazing how something may scream horror all day long. And I'm thinking, what would Carrie write? What would Carrie do on this? And then I'll get a period piece from the late 1800s, like a Victorian era piece that has nothing to do with that genre. And then somebody else to do a sci-fi. The human imagination is incredible. And can AI ever replace that? Maybe it could try, but the heart and soul is not there, so to speak. I don't know. I just find it fascinating as a human experiment. 13 weeks, and I've never seen 2 stories that are even similar.
To put a nice little bow on this, we had introductions from everybody. How about for the last little bit, everyone give us a 30-second closeout on your thoughts on AI, and then we can stop the recording and move forward. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, so let's kick it off with our presenter tonight, Linda.
Well, I think I just gave you some of my thoughts on it. I think that that we will stay ahead of AI and that we will learn how to use it. I think all of the concerns that we have raised are valid, but what humans do is learn to take the tools and use them. And I think AI is one of those tools that looks pretty darn frightening at the moment, but it may have the potential that I think we'll stay ahead of it. And I don't think we have much choice, from what I hear my family saying, that it's out there, So at any rate, that's sort of where I am.
Yeah, what about you,
Nancy? I'm sorry, JC. I'm just
Oh, we just
go ahead,
called
JC.
Nancy. We just both called on Nancy. So,
Okay. I think writers need to develop AI as a tool, as a time saver, maybe to help do some of that in-depth research. If nothing else, maybe the big history or little history, help them with their research, but to keep in mind that it's only a tool and not a replacement.
Tammy, your thoughts, ma'am.
Well, I feel like I know a little bit more than I did when I started tonight, since like I said, I'm just now sort of delving into this and learning more about it. I agree that it can be a tool, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's like all new things. It may look scary, but maybe the more we learn about it, the less scary it becomes.
All right. Miss Carrie, you've been so patient there.
I think 2 vital things to keep in mind. People need to learn how to think. Like you said, Linda, the critical thinking. It's worrisome to me, a generation coming up who does not learn that skill, whether they learn it by using the internet or by getting a book off the shelf. That critical thinking is vital to our future. And the other thing to keep in mind as writers or artists, copyright. When it comes to AI, make sure you understand what you're doing with certain ways that you use this technology, because I think it's going to bite some people people who are less thoughtful about it than this group are going to end up with some very rude surprises. That bestseller that you mentioned, Jason, who owns it? It was created by a machine. Now, where does all that revenue go? Where do the movie rights go? So, vitally important issue there. Thank you.
I'm going to go real quick, JC, and then I know I took it over kind of at the end here, but this is your meeting, so I'm going to let you have final
knock
say.
yourself out, man.
I just real quick, you can never replace human creativity. You can program the tools to help you as much. As long as we don't sacrifice our critical thinking, I think we can develop it as a good tool. Go ahead, JC.
Yeah, I think everybody, this is our meeting, Jason, for everybody, but this is, a lot of great information and just feedback and thoughts. And yeah, I appreciate everybody coming on to talk about this. Really, this topic's not going away. Maybe I'm just paranoid. Maybe I've seen Terminator way too many times. Back in 2000, we all thought when the computers changed it, the planes are going to fall out of the air, and so coming from a line like this, I just kind of again, what did you guys say? Don't anybody who is young and wants to be a writer, don't take the work out of it. Don't rely on the tool, any tool for that matter. Don't be afraid to walk in the library and get your hands dirty with microfiche. Or, I know the internet replaced it, sort of, but a lot of those old files, I know, Linda, when you've done research, you've had to go into libraries and look at that stuff. I wish there was a microfiche website where you could just go and then, even if you have to pay a fee and get all that stuff that's uploaded to the web, that would be helpful, because a lot of that old information is going to be lost if it's not, which is sad, which is why you should support your local libraries, folks. But don't take the humanity out of anything you write based on a tool. If you want to write a romance, it's hard to write a romance if you've never been in love or had your heart broken. So I think, Jason, you're right in that regards. It's our humanity that comes through and what we write, our fears and all that. So that's more than 30 seconds, but you guys nailed it today. I really appreciate everybody's participation in this and thoughts. Carrie, let's serve it up real quick. What are you going to be teaching us next month?
We're going to talk about the other hat that we wear as well as writers and publishers, which we are as independent authors, is once you've created it, once you have your book and you feel confident and you're ready to go, how do you tell people about it? And one of the main ways is your back cover copy, which can be used on websites, can be used in your Kobo or Barnes & Noble, so many different ways we can use it, and how to condense that 90,000 word beautiful piece of work down to the back of a book.
Hey, does everybody real quick before we finish up, just quickly name a title of one of your books. Anybody watching, you're interested, want to go check out some of our work? I'd love to just take real quick to pitch it. Nancy, what's one of your titles?
I have a Meadowood mystery series. There's 4 titles in that. They're all cozy mysteries. So look up Meadowood Mystery.
All right. How about you, Tammy?
The Abbey Creek Sewing Circle.
All right, Carrie.
A series called Storms of Future Past. The first one is Dreaming the Storm. It ends up being set in Appalachia, and it's another apocalypse.
Coming from the girl who actually stayed at the Stanley Hotel, for crying out loud. The Stephen King, Linda Dopkins under Joe Allison. What should we look for?
The Julia Nye mystery series, 5 books.
Excellent stuff, by the way. I have read, must admit, some of those. Jason?
Right now I have the only one I have out there is 18 Fools, but I have a few short stories and really excited about this next short story going into the anthology. Somebody challenged me to write something about Arbor Day, and I think I was able to put my own little spin on it.
So definitely check out Jason's work on Amazon if you want to look up something of mine. One book that doesn't sell well that I wish people would buy would be Pot of Gold by Cyrus Alderwood. It is a fun adventure. So yeah, check it out. Hey, everybody, I appreciate it.
To find it. I know. I just saw it back here.
Oh, you have it, right? So
I do.
But thanks again, everybody, and hopefully we'll all be back this time next month. Maybe have a few more. Who knows?
Thank you for the info.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this has been great, and folks, we'll see you down the road.